ballroom of the Astoria Grand Hotel glowed with gold and ambition. Under a dome of crystal chandeliers and orchestral music, Manhattan's elite swirled like champagne in fluted glasses. The crowd was buzzing with anticipation. Everyone was there. Politicians, tech moguls, actresses, influencers. And at the heart of it all, soaking in the limelight, as if it had been engineered just for him, stood Harrison Vance. He was 36, tall, arrogant, and painfully aware of his own success. The custom-tailored tuxedo, the silver cufflinks, the practiced smirk, it was all part of the performance. But tonight's real highlight wasn't Harrison. It was the diamond. Or rather, the diamond on Genevieve Langford's perfectly manicured finger. Genevieve, a social media star with $1 million smile and a surgically perfected jawline, flashed her hand just enough for the cameras to catch the light. 3 carats, internally flawless, she whispered to a curious guest, pretending to be modest, but angling her fingers precisely for maximum sparkle. Harrison wrapped an arm around her waist and leaned into the spotlight. He didn't just flaunt the ring, he weaponized it. "You know," he said to an investor standing nearby, "it took 3 countries and 1 very desperate diamond broker to get that beauty. Only the best for my fiancé." Laughter followed, dry and dutiful. Harrison basked in it. But across the river, in a quiet corner of Brooklyn, a woman sat cross-legged on a secondhand couch, cradling a mug of lukewarm tea. Her name was Evelyn Vance. She was Harrison's ex-wife, and she had just seen the ring too. It was all over social media, trending on Twitter. "Power couple vibes," the captions read. "Next level engagement." Evelyn clicked the screen off. The glow vanished. Her face remained still, unreadable. On the coffee table sat a copy of What to Expect When You're Expecting. She was 6 months pregnant. The same man who once said, "I don't need a ring to love you, Evelyn," was now flashing a diamond like it was a stock certificate. She remembered the way he used to talk about love, intimate, quiet, private. Now he was broadcasting it to the world like a press release. The betrayal didn't surprise her anymore. What surprised her was how numb she felt. They had been married for 5 years. She had believed in him when he was just a broke real estate agent with a dream and a credit score that wouldn't get him a Macy's card. Evelyn, a nurse practitioner, supported him financially and emotionally through the tough years. She took on extra shifts, skipped vacations, and never once questioned whether their life would turn out the way he promised. But somewhere along the way, as Harrison's success grew, so did his disdain for everything they had built together. The warmth vanished, the conversations shrank, and one rainy Tuesday, he packed a suitcase, said he was tired of the same thing every day, and left. That was 4 months ago. He didn't know she was pregnant when he walked out. Evelyn had planned to tell him that night. But when she saw the suitcase, she folded. She let him go. She told herself he didn't deserve to know, that her child deserved better than a man who saw responsibility as a burden. Now here he was, front and center at the Astoria Gala, flashing his new life like it was a Rolex ad. Her phone buzzed, a text from her friend Mia. "Girl, please tell me you're not watching this circus." She typed back, "Not anymore," then tossed the phone aside. She should have felt broken, but instead, she felt something else stir. Something cold, something quiet, something almost strategic. Because Harrison wasn't the only one who knew how to move in powerful circles. Evelyn had secrets too. Connections that went far beyond hospitals and clinics. One in particular, Lucien Moreau. They had met years ago, long before she met Harrison. He was a friend of her late father, a venture capitalist, notoriously private, devastatingly brilliant. He had always admired Evelyn's calm presence and unshakable loyalty. He had also always said, "If you ever need anything, you call me." Evelyn hadn't spoken to Lucien in years, but tonight she picked up her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and stared at the name. She didn't press call. Not yet. But the idea took root. Meanwhile, back at the gala, Harrison was basking in his element. Cameras clicked. Genevieve posed. He was a man who had erased his past and replaced it with a shinier, tighter version. When a reporter asked about his ex-wife, he waved the question off. "Ancient history," he said. "We've both moved on." But Evelyn hadn't moved on. Not yet. She had paused, regrouped, observed, and now she was ready to make her next move. And it wouldn't be quiet. Evelyn stood in front of her closet, fingers grazing the hangers like a pianist selecting a key. The invitation to the Astoria Gala had arrived the morning after Harrison's big engagement reveal. She wasn't sure who sent it. It had no return address, but she knew it wasn't a coincidence. Nothing in her life ever happened by accident anymore. The paper was thick, ivory, embossed with gold foil, black tie, high profile, no press inside the main floor. The perfect kind of event for someone like Lucien Moreau. She hadn't called him yet, but the idea from last night hadn't left her. It had matured, taken shape, become something tangible. Evelyn wasn't angry, not exactly. Anger faded. What she felt now was clarity, a sense of reclaiming space. She ran a hand over the smooth bump of her belly. 6 months along, and the baby was moving more every day. Her child, not Harrison's anymore, not legally, not emotionally, not spiritually. He made his choice. And now, she was making hers. That afternoon, Evelyn stepped out of her building dressed simply but intentionally. Navy coat, flat boots, hair in a low knot. She didn't need to look like money. She didn't have to scream power. Not where she was going. The Moreau Foundation sat in a marble building just off Fifth Avenue. It was discreet, elegant, and impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. The receptionist greeted her with a nod. "He's expecting you, Ms. Morris." She blinked. "He is?" The woman smiled faintly. "He always is." She took the elevator up 22 floors. When the doors opened, it wasn't an office she stepped into. It was an art gallery. Quiet light streamed through frosted windows. On the far end, Lucien Moreau stood with a glass of espresso in one hand, the Financial Times in the other. He looked up as if he'd only been waiting for her. "Evelyn," he said with that French-American lilt, voice low and steady. "It's been too long." She nodded, taking him in. Tailored charcoal suit, a subtle silver tie, eyes as sharp as ever. Lucien didn't look like a man who ran half of Wall Street. He looked like a man who ran himself with brutal precision. "I didn't even call," she said. "I read the news," he replied. "I saw the ring." Of course he did. He gestured for her to sit. She sank into a leather chair, exhaling. "I don't want revenge," she began. "Good," he said. "Because it's never about revenge. It's about narrative. Who controls it? Who reclaims it?" She met his eyes. "He embarrassed me, left me pregnant, and didn't even ask once if I was okay." Lucien leaned forward. "And now? He's flaunting his new fiancée like it's a stock acquisition, and I'm invisible. Erased. You are anything but invisible." He sipped his espresso. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Would you like to attend the gala?" She stared. "That's tonight." "I know. With you?" He didn't smile. Lucien never smiled unless he meant it. "Yes, I've purchased a stake in the Astoria's ownership group. Quietly. As of this morning, I have the authority to approve new sponsors, and I'd like you to be the face of the Moreau Maternal Health Initiative." Her mouth parted. "What?" "You're a nurse. You've worked in underserved clinics. You know what matters. My foundation needs a human voice, and your story deserves a stage." She hesitated. "Is this charity or strategy?" "Why can't it be both?" She inhaled, pulse racing. "What do I have to wear?" Lucien stood, walked to a panel on the wall and pressed a button. A hidden door slid open to reveal a small wardrobe. "Pick something that feels like armor," he said. "Because tonight you don't blend in. You take up space." That evening, Harrison Vance adjusted his bow tie for the third time. He was nervous, but he'd never admit it. The ring reveal had gone viral, exactly as planned. But now came the harder part, sustaining the buzz. Genevieve, in her gold satin dress, posed for selfies in the limo, tagging sponsors and beauty brands. "Do you think Evelyn saw it?" she asked, half teasing. He shrugged, sipping his bourbon. "Doesn't matter." But it did matter. Because Evelyn had never been flashy, she never wanted the spotlight. But somehow, her silence was louder than any post Genevieve could make. They entered the gala to a flurry of cameras and curated applause. Harrison grinned, guiding Genevieve to the main hall. The venue was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, orchids from Singapore, servers gliding past with trays of caviar and champagne. Then something shifted, a hush. The kind that moves like wind before a storm. Harrison turned, following the gaze of 100 heads. Evelyn. She stood beneath the archway wearing a deep emerald gown that shimmered like water. Her baby bump was visible but framed proudly, her hair swept back, makeup subtle but flawless. And beside her, Lucien Moreau. The man who didn't attend galas. The man who didn't do public. Harrison's stomach dropped. Genevieve whispered, "Who is that?" He didn't answer. Evelyn and Lucian walked slowly through the hall, the crowd parting like silk. She didn't look at Harrison, not once, but she didn't need to. Everyone else was looking at him. Later that night, Lucian raised a glass during a brief speech. "We are proud to announce the Evelyn Morris Fund for Maternal Health. Starting tonight, the Astoria Grand will host a quarterly initiative supporting underfunded clinics in New York." Applause. A standing ovation. Harrison sat in the corner, the ring on Genevieve's hand dull under the lights. Evelyn didn't need to speak. She just stood, smiling gently, her hand resting over her belly. She had arrived. And for the first time in months, the room belonged to her. Evelyn had never seen so many cameras turn away from someone like Harrison. The ballroom was still glittering. The chandeliers hadn't dimmed, the music hadn't stopped. But the atmosphere had shifted in a way that no lighting designer or event planner could fix. All eyes were on her. She hadn't meant to steal the show, but maybe in a quiet corner of her mind, she had hoped for it. Lucian stood beside her like a monument, imposing, refined, untouchable. But he never once overshadowed her. He walked slightly behind, allowing her to lead. It wasn't just chivalry. It was strategy. Everyone noticed. Everyone whispered. Harrison's jaw clenched visibly as Evelyn passed within a few feet of him. Genevieve, still glowing from her earlier social media photo shoot, followed Evelyn's every movement like a hawk sensing a threat it didn't know how to fight. She leaned into Harrison, whispering something only he could hear. But Harrison wasn't listening. He was still trying to process it. Lucian Moreau. The Lucian Moreau. The man who'd once outbid him on a Manhattan development and then flipped the property into a private cultural institute. A man who rarely appeared in public, let alone escorted women to events. A man who controlled investment portfolios larger than most small countries. And now, Evelyn's escort. Evelyn didn't say anything when they passed Harrison. But the brief moment their eyes met said more than any words could. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She didn't acknowledge him as anything more than a stranger in the crowd. That, more than anything, burned. Lucian leaned slightly toward her as they moved past the murmuring guests. "How are you holding up?" "I thought I'd feel nervous," she said, voice even. "But I'm not." Lucian smiled softly. "Because you were never the problem." They moved toward the central table, reserved for speakers and honorees. A golden name card rested on the white linen. Miss Evelyn Morris, Maternal Health Foundation Partner. Harrison blinked. "What? Foundation partner?" He hadn't seen that in the program. He turned to one of the event planners standing by the podium. "When was that added?" The woman gave him a polite but dismissive smile. "Late edition. Very exclusive." He clenched his jaw again, teeth grinding. Genevieve placed a hand on his arm. "Is she speaking tonight?" "I don't know." But she was. 30 minutes later, the lights dimmed. A spotlight settled on the stage. The host, an anchor woman from a major news network, stepped up and announced, "Tonight, we welcome someone new to our philanthropic family. A healthcare professional, a woman who has devoted years to underserved communities, and someone who, I think, reminds us all of the power of quiet strength. Please welcome Evelyn Morris." The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real. Evelyn walked to the stage, her emerald dress catching the light. The room silenced itself before she even touched the microphone. She didn't need cue cards. "My name is Evelyn Morris," she began, voice steady. "I've been a nurse practitioner for over a decade. I've worked in free clinics, city hospitals, and maternity centers where the waiting lists stretch for months and the funding runs dry long before the fiscal year ends." She paused. Her eyes flicked across the room, but not toward Harrison. "I've been told that strength is measured in noise, that you have to be loud to be seen, that you have to fight to be remembered." Another pause. "I disagree." The room leaned in. Strength is raising a child alone because someone walked away. Strength is watching someone else wear your old life like a costume and choosing not to tear it down, but to build something better in silence. Now the crowd murmured. People exchanged looks. Some guests even glanced toward Harrison. He stared ahead, stone-faced. Evelyn continued. "This new initiative, the Evelyn Morris Fund for Maternal Health, will support prenatal care programs across all 5 boroughs. It's funded by the Morrow Foundation, and its mission is simple. No woman should be invisible. Not in pregnancy, not in pain, not in purpose." Lucian stood, slowly, quietly, and began to clap. Others followed. Soon, The ballroom echoed with applause. It was the sound of acknowledgement, and Harrison felt every decibel like a pin in his chest. After the speech, Evelyn returned to the table. Several guests came to thank her. CEOs, physicians, even a state senator. She accepted their words with poise, always redirecting the praise back to the cause, never once making it about her personal life. But people weren't stupid. They had seen the before and the after. And this, clearly, was after. Harrison, unable to stand the eyes and the whispers, excused himself. He stepped out onto the balcony, pulling his phone from his pocket. He scrolled through Instagram. There she was, Evelyn, on stage, tagged in a dozen posts, her name trending, and Genevieve, still posing, still hashtagging, still trying to matter. But none of her posts had caught traction. He looked up at the night sky and realized, maybe for the first time, he had miscalculated. He had bet everything on visibility, on appearance, on flash. But Evelyn had quietly built something that made all of that look meaningless. And now she had the one thing he no longer did: public respect. Inside, Lucien leaned toward Evelyn and whispered, "I believe they'll be talking about you long after tonight." She smiled, genuinely this time. "That's not why I did it." "I know," he said. "That's why it matters." The night ended with quiet farewells and long looks. Reporters didn't chase Evelyn. They didn't need to. Her story had already been told on stage in silence and strength. And somewhere, Harrison watched the ballroom empty, realizing too late, the ring had been shiny. But it had no weight. Not like her. The news cycle the next morning was merciless. Photos of Evelyn in her emerald gown were splashed across fashion blogs, charity roundups, and gossip columns. Her name trended on Twitter, not as someone's ex-wife, but as a healthcare advocate, a poised speaker, a new face of philanthropy. The internet loved a comeback, and this wasn't just a comeback, it was a coronation. Meanwhile, Harrison sat at his kitchen island, clutching a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. Genevieve was still asleep upstairs, her phone on the nightstand buzzing with unanswered DMs. Most of them weren't about her. They were about Evelyn. Every headline was a different flavor of humiliation. The one he left, Evelyn Morris shines with billionaire backing. From nurse to powerhouse, Evelyn's quiet rise. Moreau's mystery date revealed, and she stole the show. Harrison clicked through photos, jaw tightening. There was one of Evelyn and Lucien stepping out of the limo, another of her on stage, hand resting gently on her stomach, smile calm but commanding. The comments stung more than he'd ever admit. He left that for an Instagram model? She's glowing. He looks confused. Men really don't know what they have until it walks into a gala with a billionaire. He closed the laptop with a snap. He hadn't lost Evelyn last night. He'd lost her the day he walked out. But it hadn't sunk in until now. Until she'd shown the world she never needed him in the first place. Across town, Evelyn sat at a small cafe near the hospital where she used to work. She hadn't planned to go out, but something about the fresh air, the soft clink of mugs, the smell of roasted beans, it grounded her. Lucien had sent flowers to her apartment that morning. White lilies and blue hydrangeas, her favorites. The note was simple. You reminded them who you are, proud of you. She kept the card tucked in her wallet. The barista recognized her from the headlines but said nothing. Just smiled warmly and offered her drink on the house. That meant more than the applause last night. This quiet acknowledgement, this return to ordinary life with just a hint of extraordinary. Her phone buzzed. "Mia, girl, you broke the internet. Also, are you okay?" She typed back. Surprisingly, yeah. Then, after a moment, "I think I'm more than okay." Genevieve awoke to chaos. Her inbox was full of canceled brand deals. Some polite, some not. One read, "In light of recent media attention shifting to Ms. Morris, we've decided to pivot our campaign toward a more grounded public figure." She nearly threw her phone across the room. The night before had been perfect, until it wasn't. She stormed into the kitchen, wearing a silk robe and nothing else. "Harrison, why didn't you tell me your ex-wife was friends with Lucien Moreau?" He looked up slowly. "She's not just friends." "What does that mean?" "She's working with him. Some maternal health thing," Genevieve scoffed. "Oh, please, since when do billionaires invest in nurses? She must have—" He cut her off with a look so sharp it stopped her mid-sentence. "Don't. Evelyn didn't use anyone. She doesn't need to." The silence that followed was suffocating. Genevieve crossed her arms. "So, are you in love with her again?" He didn't answer, because she already knew. Back at the cafe, Evelyn met with a woman from the New York Women's Health Alliance. They wanted her on a panel. Paid appearance, full coverage. She agreed, but only if part of the money went to community clinics. After the meeting, she walked home slowly, enjoying the feel of sunlight on her skin. She stopped at a park bench, watching children play, mothers chat, dogs chase squirrels. It was the kind of simple peace she hadn't felt in a long time. For years, she had lived small, not because she was weak, but because she had loved a man who needed to be the biggest thing in the room, and for him to be big, she had to be quiet. She wasn't quiet anymore, and she wasn't just big, she was undeniable. That night, Lucien called. "Are you overwhelmed?" he asked. "A little," she admitted, "but in a good way." "I figured," he said, "which is why I booked a car. Just something low-key. Dinner, fresh air, no cameras." She hesitated. "Are you sure you want that kind of attention?" "I'm not asking you out for attention, Evelyn. I'm asking you out because I like you, and because you're about to change the world, and I'd like a front-row seat." She smiled, then laughed. It felt strange. It felt right. "Okay," she said. "Dinner sounds nice." As Lucien's town car glided through Manhattan traffic, Harrison sat in his penthouse staring at the skyline. It used to inspire him. Now it mocked him. He had everything. Money, status, a pretty new fiancée. But none of it compared to the woman he once dismissed as too soft, too boring, too ordinary. There was nothing ordinary about Evelyn Morris now. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and changed the narrative. And Harrison? He was just a footnote in her story now. Somewhere across the city, Evelyn laughed over dessert, baby kicking softly under her hand while the man beside her watched with quiet admiration. She hadn't planned on starting over. But now that she had, she wouldn't settle for anything less than everything she deserved. 2 days after the gala, Harrison Vance did something he hadn't done in years. He showed up at Evelyn's doorstep. Not her old address, the one they shared during their marriage, with its white brick facade and flowerless balcony, but her new place in Brooklyn. Smaller, simpler, stronger, like her. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring a speech. He just stood there, in a charcoal jacket and polished shoes, the same man who once claimed he needed space, now standing in the very space he had abandoned. Evelyn opened the door slowly, one hand on her hip, the other resting protectively over her stomach. She looked tired, beautiful, powerful. "Harrison," she said flatly, "why are you here?" He cleared his throat. I figured we should talk. I didn't want to text." She didn't step aside. She didn't invite him in. "About what?" He blinked. "The gala. Everything. You looked amazing." "That's not a conversation," she replied. There was a silence, one of those deep, uncomfortable silences that used to happen toward the end of their marriage, when the love had become a ghost and the air felt too heavy to breathe. "I was surprised," he continued. "I didn't know you were involved with Moreau." "I'm not involved with anyone," Evelyn said. "I was invited. I accepted." He scratched the back of his neck. "Still, it caught me off guard." She raised an eyebrow. "Why? You thought I'd be invisible forever?" He hesitated. "No, I just didn't expect all that." "All what?" "The speech, the spotlight, the campaign. You were always so private." Evelyn tilted her head. "I was quiet, Harrison, not invisible. And maybe I stayed quiet because every time I tried to be anything more, you told me I was too intense or too ambitious. You made me feel like my light had to be dim for you to shine." He looked away, shame crawling up his neck like heat. "I didn't mean it like that," he muttered. "But that's how you made me feel," she said simply. Another pause. "I didn't come here to fight," he added. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." She stared at him, and for the first time since their divorce, Harrison saw her without the veil of familiarity. Not as the woman who folded his socks or packed his lunches, but as someone entirely separate from him, unreachable, resilient. She had grown into her power, and there was no going back. "You're not just sorry," she said finally. "You're embarrassed." His mouth opened to protest, but he stopped, because it was true. She didn't wait for him to respond. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Not for me, for you. Maybe you needed to see what I look like without you." With that, she gently closed the door. No slam, no final word, just closure. Later that night, Evelyn sat on the couch, feet up, tea in hand, heart unexpectedly calm. She thought she'd feel rage or satisfaction or something bigger. But instead, She felt peace. Lucien texted her around 8 p.m. "How's your day?" She responded, strangely healing. Then after a beat, he came to the door. Lucien didn't reply right away. When he finally did, it was simple. "And?" She smiled faintly. "I let him see the version of me he never imagined. Then I let him go." Across the river, Genevieve was hosting a brand dinner. It was awkward, quiet. Half the guest list had dropped out. A few sponsors ghosted her completely. She posted a photo with the caption, "Grateful for growth." But it got half the engagement of Evelyn's recent fundraiser announcement. She scrolled through Evelyn's page, seeing updates about her new maternal wellness clinics, donations flooding in, photos of Evelyn in scrubs holding hands with new mothers. Genevieve slammed her phone down. It wasn't supposed to go like this. She had the ring, the influencer deals, the man. But somehow Evelyn was the one the world was listening to. The following week, Evelyn sat in a boardroom full of people twice her age and 3 times her net worth. She pitched a new pilot program for single mother housing near the city's lowest funded hospitals. Her words were precise, her plan airtight, her impact undeniable. The vote was unanimous. Lucien met her outside the building. "You're officially a force," he said, offering his arm as they walked. "I'm officially exhausted," she laughed. "I have just the thing." He guided her to a quiet rooftop lounge overlooking the East River. There was no press, no paparazzi, just fresh air and a skyline that now felt more like hers. They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the water. "You ever think about the way things used to be?" he asked softly. "All the time," she replied, but not with regret, more like gratitude. "For what?" "For the storm, because without it, I wouldn't know what I'm capable of." Lucien nodded slowly. "Would you change anything?" he asked. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I wouldn't give him a second chance," she said, "but I wouldn't erase him either. He was the lesson. This," she gestured to the skyline, the stars above, the peace in her chest, "this is the reward." And with that, Evelyn Morris leaned back in her chair, the wind lifting a few strands of her hair, her child kicking softly, and the man beside her, watching with a kind of admiration that had nothing to do with power. Just presence. She didn't need to win anymore. She'd already arrived. Evelyn hadn't expected the storm. Not the emotional kind. She had weathered that already. But the literal one. Thick gray clouds gathered over the city like a warning. By late afternoon, the rain was coming down in sheets, soaking the sidewalks, slowing traffic, and silencing the usual Manhattan chaos. She didn't mind. Something about the rain matched her mood. Introspective, still, ready. She sat by her window, legs curled under her, watching the water streak down the glass. Her phone buzzed. "Lucien, storm's getting bad. You good?" she replied. "Cozy. Baby's kicking like it wants out though, lol. Tell them to wait till after the weekend. We have a gala to host." Evelyn smiled. It was true. In 48 hours, she would co-host her first major event, not just attend. This time, she was on the inside. Her name was on the invitations. Her face was in the press kit. She wasn't the ex-wife anymore. She wasn't anyone's plus one. She was the main story. Harrison, meanwhile, was unraveling. He wouldn't call it that, of course. He was still showing up to meetings, still dressing the part. But something in him had shifted. The confidence he once wore like cologne now felt manufactured. Thin. He stared at his phone, scrolling past another article on Evelyn's partnership with a national prenatal brand. She was everywhere. On morning talk shows, in podcasts, on panels. And not once had she used his name. He was invisible in her success. And for someone who had built his career on visibility, it was a kind of death. Genevieve noticed the change. The way he didn't meet her eyes during dinner. The way he sighed more. Checked his phone less. "You're quiet," she said one night. He looked up, just tired. "You're always tired lately." He nodded but said nothing. "Is it work?" He hesitated. "No." She waited. "It's her, isn't it?" He didn't answer. But his silence said enough. The next morning, Evelyn sat in a fitting room while her stylist pinned the last detail of her custom gown. It was deep blue, sleek but modest, hugging her curves without hiding the pregnancy. The designer had called it power with softness. She stared at her reflection. It had been a long road. She saw her former self in that mirror too. The girl who once stayed up late editing Harrison's business proposals, who skipped her own promotions to cook his investor dinners. The woman who once walked away without asking for anything. Not even closure. That woman was still inside her. but she was no longer steering the ship. Her phone rang. It was Mia. "Okay," Mia said breathlessly. "Just saw the guest list. Do you know who RSVP'd?" Evelyn laughed. "Mia, it's a 400-person event. Harrison." Evelyn blinked. "He RSVP'd?" "Confirmed." "And Genevieve." For a second, Evelyn felt something. Not dread, not fear. Just an old memory trying to push its way to the surface. She took a breath. "Okay. That's it? Just okay?" "I'm not showing up for them," she said. "I'm showing up for me." The night of the gala arrived with more rain. But inside the Metropolitan Hall, everything shimmered. Dozens of guests walked the navy carpet, pausing under golden lighting to pose in gowns and tuxedos. Waiters carried flutes of champagne and trays of truffle hors d'oeuvres. Evelyn arrived in a black SUV, stepping out slowly with Lucien offering his arm. Cameras flashed. But it wasn't the kind of chaos that overwhelmed her before. She was ready now. And when she stepped into the venue, the room didn't gasp. It stood. People turned, not in shock but in recognition. This was Evelyn Morris, founder, speaker, mother-to-be, the woman who had turned silence into strategy and heartbreak into a mission. Lucien leaned in. "You okay?" She nodded. "Let's go make a scene." Harrison arrived 20 minutes later, his usual smirk replaced with something more fragile. Genevieve clung to his arm, her dress glittering aggressively under the lights. But no one really looked. Not at them. They walked in just in time to see Evelyn greeting a U.S. senator, then laughing with a film producer. She looked unstoppable. Harrison froze for a second. "She doesn't even see us," Genevieve whispered. "No," he said quietly. "She sees us. She just doesn't care." They walked to their table, which, by some cosmic joke, was directly across from Evelyn's. When she finally did glance their way, her expression didn't change. She acknowledged them with the same neutral grace she gave every other guest. It wasn't hostility. It was distance. Like they were no longer part of her world. Because they weren't. Later in the evening, Lucien took the stage to welcome guests. He spoke about maternal care, policy reform, and Evelyn's foundation. Then he handed her the mic. As Evelyn stepped up, she saw Harrison in the front row. She didn't flinch. "Tonight," she began, "is not about power or titles. It's about the women who raise nations and never get credit. It's about mothers who work 2 jobs while growing a human inside them. It's about reclaiming the narrative, not just mine, but all of ours." Applause erupted. Lucien nodded proudly. Evelyn smiled. She had faced the storm, internally and externally. And now, standing in front of the very man who once told her she wasn't enough, she realized something profound. She wasn't just healed. She was free. The gala ended late, but the buzz lasted much longer. News outlets the next morning didn't just report on the event, they dissected it. Evelyn's speech, Lucien's praise, the thunderous applause, it was everywhere. But what truly ignited headlines was the photo. One candid shot, snapped by a freelance photographer. Evelyn, stepping down from the stage, her hand lightly brushing her stomach, her face calm and focused. Lucien beside her, slightly turned, watching her. Not with dominance, not with claim, but with respect. And behind them, blurred in the background, stood Harrison and Genevieve. No labels were needed. The contrast told the story. Evelyn purpose, poise, presence. Harrison past, accessory. The internet didn't hold back. She didn't just move on, she leveled up. The glow-up isn't physical, it's emotional. She healed out loud. But beneath the headlines and reposts, something deeper had begun to stir. A truth Evelyn had held close, quiet for months. Something she had once considered private, even sacred. Now, she wondered if it was time. Lucien noticed the shift before she said a word. They were walking through Central Park, one of their now regular late afternoon rituals. The crisp autumn air bit gently at her cheeks, but Evelyn didn't mind. The city felt softer when it slowed down. "You've been quieter today," Lucien said, glancing at her as fallen leaves crunched beneath their shoes. "I've been thinking," she replied. "About?" She hesitated. Then, telling the truth. Lucien slowed his pace. "What truth?" Her hand instinctively moved to her belly. "The babies." Lucien didn't respond immediately. He let the silence sit like he always did, never rushing her, never pressing. "I've protected the truth because I didn't want the narrative to be about him," Evelyn said. "I wanted this child to be about love, not damage. And now I want to control the story before someone else tells it." Lucien nodded slowly. "You don't owe anyone an explanation." "I know," she said. but maybe I owe it to myself. Later that night, Evelyn sat in her living room, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She had drafted dozens of versions before, typed, deleted, rewritten. But tonight, she didn't need a script. She simply needed her voice. She opened a blank post and began. For months, I've been told how strong I am, how poised, how above it all. And I've been grateful for the kindness. But I want to be honest, fully. I didn't start this journey with strength. I started it heartbroken, afraid, and alone. When my marriage ended, I didn't just lose a partner. I lost a vision, a future. I was pregnant when he walked away, though he didn't know. I stayed quiet because I believed silence would protect me. But silence also protects the wrong people sometimes. So here's the truth. Yes, Harrison Vance is the biological father of my child. No, he wasn't there when I found out. No, he hasn't been involved. And yes, I've chosen to move forward without him. This child is not a scandal, not a consequence. They are a beginning, a promise. I am not asking for pity or applause. I'm asking for understanding, and maybe for other women in similar shoes, to know you are not broken. You are becoming. Love, Evelyn. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then she clicked post and waited. The internet exploded, in the best way. Her post was shared thousands of times in hours, flooded with comments. Messages from mothers, single parents, women who had been silenced, shamed, ignored. Women who had stayed quiet out of fear. She had cracked something open, and in doing so, released herself. Harrison read the post alone in his office. No fanfare, no warning, just truth. Cold, unfiltered, permanent. He read it once, then again. By the third time, he realized what he was feeling. Not anger, not even shame, just emptiness. She hadn't written it to hurt him. That would have been easier. What she wrote was stronger. It was closure. And for the first time, Harrison Vance couldn't spin the story. It wasn't his to spin. Lucien came over that night, uninvited but welcome. Evelyn opened the door in leggings and a hoodie, hair tied up, no makeup. He looked at her like she was wearing a crown. "You did it," he said softly. "I think I did," she replied. He stepped inside, handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" "A letter from a woman in Michigan, single mom of 2, said your post gave her courage to leave an abusive situation." Evelyn swallowed hard. "There's dozens more," Lucien added. "I figured you'd want to see one." She read the letter, then pressed it to her heart. "I didn't know it would matter this much." "It matters," Lucien said, "because you gave the silence a name." They sat in quiet for a while, the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full. Then Evelyn looked at him. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not about the post, about everything coming next. Birth, motherhood, doing it alone." Lucien reached over and gently took her hand. "You're not alone." And for the first time she believed it, not because he said it, but because she no longer needed someone to save her. She had saved herself. Now she simply had room for someone to stand beside her. Outside, the city buzzed as usual, but inside that small Brooklyn apartment, something had shifted permanently. Evelyn had told the truth, and with that truth, she had given herself back her name, her narrative, her power. And there was no going back. 2 weeks after Evelyn's post, the air around her felt different. Not because people treated her like a celebrity, though some did, but because they treated her like a truth teller. She couldn't walk into a coffee shop without a stranger placing a hand over their heart and saying, "Thank you." At the grocery store, a teenage girl stopped her and whispered, "My mom showed me your story." She cried. But Evelyn didn't post for validation. She posted to reclaim her voice. And now that it was fully hers again, she was ready to do more than speak. She was ready to transform. It started with a mirror. She was getting dressed for a media appearance, just a small morning talk show, and paused halfway through fixing her hair. For months, she had chosen modest colors, low heels, soft makeup. She wanted the message to shine, not the packaging. But today felt different. Today she felt like honoring the woman who had once dimmed herself to survive. So she put on the red dress, the one she had bought 5 years ago and never wore. Bold, sharp, unapologetic. It hugged her growing belly in all the right places and made no effort to hide the fact that she was both powerful and expecting. When she walked onto the studio set, the host blinked. "Evelyn," she said, stunned. "You look radiant." "I feel it," Evelyn replied, smiling. The interview wasn't about her past this time. It was about the future. Her foundation was expanding. 3 new clinics in the Bronx, 1 in Newark. She was partnering with doulas, mental health counselors, OBGYNs. Her voice carried not only power, but plans. She didn't just represent a cause now, she was the cause. After the segment aired, Lucien called. "You lit that screen on fire," he said. "Wasn't just the dress," she teased. "No, but the dress made it hard for anyone to look away." She laughed, feeling the kind of confidence that didn't depend on anyone's gaze. "Can I take you to dinner tonight?" he asked. "No press. Just us." "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." And this time, she meant it without hesitation. That evening, Lucien didn't take her to a fancy restaurant. He brought her to a rooftop garden he had built quietly atop one of his properties. Lush, private, filled with jasmine and soft lights. "It's peaceful," she whispered, looking out over the skyline. "You don't always need applause to know you're winning," he said. They ate takeout from her favorite Thai place on linen-covered crates. He brought her sparkling cider. They talked about the baby, about the future, about healing without erasure. At one point, Evelyn asked, "Did you ever expect this?" "What? This? Us?" Lucien looked at her. "I hoped." She exhaled, emotion tightening her chest. "I don't want to be anyone's redemption story." "You're not," he said. "You're the author." The next morning, Harrison saw her interview on TV. He was flipping channels absent-mindedly, half-focused on emails, when her voice cut through the static. He looked up. There she was. The red dress, the glow, the sharp eyes and calm poise. He stared. The host asked about her foundation, her goals, her motivation. Evelyn answered with grace. She didn't mention him once, and somehow that stunned the most. She didn't need to drag him to elevate herself. She had moved beyond him. Genevieve noticed his expression and turned off the TV. "Why do you keep watching her?" she asked. He didn't answer. "She's not coming back," Genevieve added. "I know. Then why act like she is?" "I'm not." But he was, in every quiet moment. Every time Evelyn's name came up in the press. Every time someone said, "She's changed everything." He wasn't in love with her anymore. He was in awe of her. And that was worse, because he knew he never deserved her in the first place. Meanwhile, Evelyn was changing again. Not for anyone else, for herself. She hired a new stylist, not to impress but to express. Strong lines, bold colors, structured silhouettes. She wore her hair higher, walked straighter. Her social media began to reflect her duality. Soft mother, fierce leader. She posted a photo one day. No makeup, baby bump visible, captioned, "Creating life, creating legacy." It went viral in under 2 hours. But the best moment that day didn't come from her phone. It came from a letter, handwritten, waiting in her mailbox, from a young nurse in Detroit. It read, "I watched you speak and realized I didn't have to wait for permission to become who I already was. I applied to grad school today. You reminded me I was worth it." Evelyn held the letter to her chest, tears welling. It wasn't about fame, it was about fire. And she had reignited more than her own. Lucien surprised her a few days later. He took her to a private theater where a group of young girls from low-income neighborhoods were rehearsing a play about powerful women in history. They had written their own ending. "And who's this character?" Lucien asked one of the girls, pointing at the last figure in their lineup. "That's Evelyn," the girl said proudly. "She's the one who reminds us we don't need a prince." Evelyn choked back emotion. Lucien leaned in and whispered, "You've become more than you ever imagined." She smiled. "I've just started." And she meant it. The pain hadn't vanished. The betrayal still existed in her past. But now it wasn't the headline, it was a footnote. Because Evelyn Morris had rewritten the narrative. And she wasn't done yet. The night of the Foundation's annual gala arrived with an air of electricity. Unlike the first time Evelyn had walked into the Astoria Grand as Lucien's guest, this time she wasn't on anyone's arm. She wasn't a +1 or a mysterious ex or the quiet woman behind a billion-dollar man. She was the woman in charge. Her name was on the banner. Her signature sealed every donation letter. Her speech would be the final keynote. Evelyn Morris wasn't reclaiming space anymore. She owned the room. The event's theme was power through purpose, and Evelyn embodied it. Dressed in a sleek ivory gown that hugged her full pregnancy with pride, her shoulders bare, hair pulled into a low bun, she walked into the room to a round of applause that hadn't even been cued. People stood when they saw her. And this time, it wasn't because of surprise. It was out of respect. Lucien arrived 10 minutes later, content to follow her lead. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, and a quiet smile. Everyone knew they were close, perhaps more, but neither felt the need to define it publicly. Their connection wasn't performative. It was real. Harrison watched from across the ballroom. He had received the invitation 2 weeks earlier, addressed formally to Mr. Harrison Vance and guest, as if whoever handled Evelyn's list had gone out of their way to include him. Or maybe Evelyn herself had done it. He had RSVP'd without thinking. Genevieve had RSVP'd too, but bailed last minute after seeing Evelyn's last Vogue profile. Something about she didn't just survive, she reinvented had rubbed her the wrong way. So Harrison came alone. He wore a tailored tux, the same watch Evelyn had gifted him years ago. But no one noticed. They were all watching her. And he couldn't blame them. Because for the first time in his life, he was watching Evelyn too. Not as a man who once loved her, but as someone who never really saw her until it was too late. Evelyn greeted donors, hugged supporters, posed for photos. She laughed easily, moved gracefully, her confidence a language of its own. But her eyes scanned the room occasionally, like she knew what was coming. She wasn't just waiting for a moment, she was setting the stage for it. The crowd gathered at 9 p.m. sharp for the keynote. The lights dimmed. A hush swept through the hall. Lucian stepped up to the podium first. 3 years ago, I met a woman who reminded me that healing is not passive, that some people rise quietly, but when they do, the world has no choice but to listen. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our founder, Evelyn Morris. Evelyn walked onto the stage as the lights found her, the applause thunderous. She took a breath and spoke. I used to believe power belonged to those who spoke the loudest, she began. The boldest, the most ruthless. But then I lost everything, and I realized real power is quiet. It's the decision to rebuild, not out of revenge, but out of intention. She looked out at the audience. I was left, I was dismissed, I was underestimated, but I wasn't destroyed. Because what some people call the end is often just the start of a better story. She paused, then continued. I am not here tonight as someone who made it. I'm here as someone making it, day by day. As a mother, as a builder. As someone who believes every woman deserves to walk into a room and feel like it was built for her too. The applause started again, softer at first, then louder. Some guests stood. Evelyn raised her hand gently. One last thing, she said. To the man who left me at my most vulnerable, thank you. A ripple of gasps. Harrison froze. Because in your absence, she said, her voice unwavering, I met the version of myself I never would have found if I had stayed. And to every woman who has been left, lied to, or told she was too much, let them say it, and then show them exactly what too much looks like when it walks back into the room and owns the night. The audience erupted. It was the kind of moment that would be replayed 1,000 times across reels, news clips, and late-night commentary. But for Evelyn, it was more than a moment. It was closure. Back at his table, Harrison didn't clap. He just sat still, jaw tight, heart loud in his ears. She hadn't dragged his name, but she had obliterated his version of the story. And now the world saw what he never appreciated when he had the chance. After the speech, Evelyn stepped off stage and was greeted by her team, press reps, and donors. But Lucian was waiting quietly near the back, arms crossed, eyes proud. She moved toward him, heels clicking against marble. You did it, he said. I didn't do it for them, she replied. I know. She looked toward the exit where Harrison was slipping out alone. I said what I needed to say, she whispered, then let it go. And she did. She turned back to the crowd, the music rising again, the lights warming the room. Tonight, Evelyn Morris didn't just win. She owned her past, her power, and her purpose in front of everyone who had ever doubted her, and not once did she ask for permission. The next morning, the world woke up to Evelyn Morris. Not just in headlines or viral clips, but in conversations at kitchen tables, in classrooms where teachers showed her speech to young girls, in therapy sessions where women played her words to remind themselves they weren't crazy for wanting more. She wasn't just a trending name, she was a reminder. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, robe wrapped around her, one hand resting on her belly. The baby was kicking gently, almost rhythmically, as if clapping. She smiled. Lucian walked in, 2 mugs of tea in hand. You're up early. Hard to sleep after torching a ballroom, she said playfully. He laughed. You did more than that, you built something in there. She accepted the tea. I've been thinking a lot about legacy. Yours? Ours, this baby's. Every woman who doesn't have the microphone, but still survives. Lucian nodded. You gave them a voice. She sipped her tea. Now I want to give them space. What kind of space? A permanent one. She turned to him, eyes steady. I want to build a center, not just a foundation, a real place. Housing, healthcare, childcare, training, not just money thrown at a problem. Structure. Lucian smiled slowly. Tell me where to write the first check. 2 months later, the Evelyn Morris Center for Resilience opened its doors in downtown Brooklyn. The building was modern but warm, earth tones, open space, sunlight pouring in through high windows. The entrance featured a mural, a mosaic of hundreds of women's faces, real ones, collected from stories submitted around the country. Above it, we are not rebuilding, we are rising. It wasn't just a center, it was a movement. Harrison didn't attend the grand opening. He saw the press, the photos, the interviews, but he stayed home. It wasn't bitterness, it was acknowledgement. He had lost something extraordinary, not just a woman, but a future he never had the courage to imagine. And now he watched her shape the world without him. That was his consequence. Genevieve had moved on too, quietly, resentfully. She still posted online, but the engagement wasn't the same. People didn't want glitter without purpose anymore. Evelyn had shifted the standard, and people had noticed. Back at the center, Evelyn stood in the main hallway watching the first wave of women arrive. Some young, some older, some pregnant, some with toddlers, some with nothing but a backpack and hope. They didn't look at her like she was a celebrity. They looked at her like she understood. Because she did. She walked through those doors once, metaphorically, years ago. Pregnant, heartbroken, terrified. And now she stood on the other side, holding that door wide open. Later that day, she sat in her new office, glass walls, cozy chairs, shelves lined with donated books and baby toys. Lucian walked in, holding a folded piece of paper. What's this? She asked. A letter, from someone unexpected? She opened it. It was from Harrison. Evelyn, I could never say this in person without making it about me, so I'm saying it here. Thank you for not dragging my name through the mud. Thank you for telling your truth with dignity. And thank you for building something that reminded me what real strength looks like. I won't pretend to deserve your forgiveness, but I hope one day I earn your peace. H. Evelyn folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer. She didn't smile, she didn't cry, she just breathed. Then turned back to her desk, where real work waited. That evening, she gave a small speech at the center's closing circle. No cameras, just staff, volunteers, and the first group of women enrolled in the new mentorship program. She stood without a mic, hands resting on her belly. I was told once, she said, that I was too sensitive, too emotional, too intense. A few women chuckled knowingly. But I've learned those are not flaws, Evelyn continued. They're power sources. They're why I can see you, hear you, hold space for you, because I've been you. She looked around the circle. And now we rise together. They clapped, not loud, not flashy, but full of meaning. Afterward, one young woman approached her. She couldn't have been more than 19. Thank you, she said, voice cracking. You made me feel possible. Evelyn hugged her. That was the real legacy. Not buildings, not donors, belief. Weeks passed. The baby came. A girl. Evelyn held her in the hospital bed, Lucian sitting beside her, overwhelmed with quiet emotion. She's perfect, he whispered. She's powerful, Evelyn replied. They named her Sloane Grace Morris. Sloane for strength, Grace for how Evelyn carried herself through the fire. 1 month later, Evelyn wrote a final post. I used to think motherhood would break me. I was wrong. It made me whole. I am not weak. I am not lucky someone stayed. I chose my peace. I built my legacy. I became the woman I needed when I was scared. And if you're reading this, so can you. It was shared millions of times, translated into 5 languages, printed on the walls of shelters and centers across the world. Evelyn never went back to who she was, because the old version of her was never the full picture. She wasn't just a wife, or an ex, or a survivor. She was a force, and the world would never forget her name. So the story has ended, dear friends, and if you're still here, still watching or listening at this point, then maybe something inside this story spoke to you in a way that words often can't explain. Maybe it wasn't just Evelyn's journey, it was yours too. Because at the heart of it, this story isn't just about betrayal or glamour or revenge. It's about choosing yourself in the silence. About healing, not for show, but for soul. About realizing that when the world counts you out, your next move can be the loudest whisper of all. I'm still here, and I'm becoming. There's something sacred about watching someone fall apart and not just survive but come back stronger, softer, and wiser. That's what Evelyn did, and maybe that's what you're doing too. There's a beautiful quote from heterodox wisdom that says, "Do not be ashamed of how long it took you to heal. You are still healing, and that too is holy." So maybe you're not where you want to be yet. Maybe you're still holding back tears in private. Maybe your strength doesn't look glamorous. It just looks like waking up again, trying again, breathing through the pain. But hear this. Your healing is enough. Your journey is real. And just like Evelyn, you're not waiting to be chosen anymore. You are already becoming the woman or the man you were always meant to be. If this story stirred something in you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Not just for the content, but to remind someone else who might need to hear this today. You are not broken. You are rising. And if you're still here, thank you. You matter more than you know.